Hi, Rachel. How are you today?
Hey Nadine, I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy and honored to have you. Just to kind of frame and give some context. So, Rachel and I connected briefly at a podcasting conference last month, and we had maybe like a 10-minute conversation, and I walked away with just a wealth of knowledge. Like, you gave me some gems, some homework. In the brief interaction we had, I was like, I know I wanted and needed to have you on the show to talk a little bit more about how we're spending our money in sobriety. The sober girlies are really, really concerned about self-care. It's like we get rid of all of the toxic substances and then we want to pour and invest into ourselves. But like, what does that actually look like? So yeah, let's kind of jump into it. You have an extensive background in fashion, and I love this idea of like the devil wears Prada. Is that a true, I guess, assessment of what your experience was like in the fashion industry?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not so different. I mean, every job you have is going to be different, and it really depends on who your manager is. But I always think about in The Devil Wears Prada how the woman who plays the main character, the Anna Wintour character, how she says, "Oh, I saw a chest at a store this weekend. Can you go and buy it?" I had like my very first boss would be like, "Oh, I saw a t-shirt with a bow on it at Bergdorf. Can you go and get it?" And you go to Bergdorf and there's like 30 t-shirts with bows on them. I'm like, like texting my manager to be like, do you think it's this one? Do you think it's the red Valentino one? I was like, because there's also another one over here that has a different kind of bow. And she's like, "I just buy them all, Rachel, and then we'll return whichever." Like literally that kind of stuff.
Wow. I mean, partly that sounds like a dream job to me, but also I can imagine just the excess and like the materialism associated with a role like that.
So I'm so glad you brought up materialism, because actually that's one of the reasons I ultimately decided that I wanted to leave fashion, was that I felt like fundamentally it was misaligned with who I am as a person. Like I'm really over the like I've never been I think as far as fashion designers go, like a particularly materialistic person. But working in fashion and selling people on the idea that buying stuff was going to make them happy really did not resonate for me, because I know for myself, buying stuff makes me temporarily happy. I enjoy it I get that dopamine hit, and then when it wears off, I'm got something in my house that I have to organize. I'm not like the neatest person, like, I'm no Marie Kondo over here. So like, it just, I realized like this is not like fundamentally not how I want to use my resources, is buying skincare and makeup and clothes and all this stuff. And I was always, when I worked in fashion, I think one of the least well-dressed and made up people in my offices, because I was surrounded by people wearing head to toe designer.
It's giving Andy, like literally the character that is played by Anne Hathaway, right? Like you're just kind of like bright-eyed, bushy tail, like I'm just here because I love design, and or she was a journalist, but you get the point. And like you just see all of these archetypes that apparently are real in fashion. So that's great to know. And let's get into it, because you touched on some really amazing points, which is this idea that obviously materialism is a big part of just as New York City people, like you've lived in New York. I currently live in New York. We're constantly being marketed to buy, buy, buy. And to your point, it's a temporary dopamine rush. You're like, oh, amazing, I have these things now. But then it's like, what do I do with these things? Where do I put these things? Quite literally, if you're in New York City, we have a confined, limited amount of space. So where am I putting these items? And then it becomes more stress inducing to figure out like where I'm going to put the things. Anyway, I digress. The point I wanted to kind of talk about here is sober people, I think especially sober women, often when we remove the toxicity or the toxic substance of alcohol or whatever the substance of choice was, we feel like we need to pour back into ourselves and invest in ourselves. But the way that we usually go about it is through the means of self-care products. So whether that be skincare, really expensive serums, right? Or even today, I was looking on Instagram and I saw this reel that's trending, which is like, I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I shop. Yeah, I don't do all these other things. My drug of choice is shopping. So do you have any thoughts around how, first of all, how we are being marketed as women who are sober, and if there's a better way to think through how we're going to spend our money as opposed to just buying things?
I'm so glad you asked this question. This is my favorite question. Okay, so So I think sober women in particular, but all women are, like you said, being marketed to around the idea of self-care. And I am like an elder millennial. There's a ton of millennial burnout. And I think even Gen Z is just like burnt out. They graduated into a pandemic. It's been like nothing but stress. And so everyone is looking for a way to relieve stress. And so when you buy a self-care product, you get the dopamine hit from buying it, and then you get to use the product. So right. You know, it seems like this is great, right? But the problem is that it's just a temporary solution. And the marketing around wellness has gotten really out of control, right? Everything is being marketed as wellness, right? And I think that when you truly look at a lot of self-care stuff, you have to ask yourself if it's really bringing you like long-term joy. Do you remember, like if I asked you what you bought for self-care for yourself in November, do you remember?
No, but if we did some forensic accounting, I would probably spend a lot on it. And the fact that I can't even remember is embarrassing because I literally am obsessed with spending money on skincare and things that I know I probably don't need.
Well, so I always call this the skincare graveyard. Like, girls, like, go look in your cabinet. Like, what did you buy that you absolutely had to have? And I'm guilty of this too, by the way. I want to make sure that like everyone understands that I'm not like against buying skincare. I'm not against buying beauty products. I just want you to buy products that you're actually like, you think they have a long-term benefit. You've done the research, you're excited about it. And it's not just like, oh, I walked by Sephora and the door was open. And now my wallet is $150 lighter.
Yes, exactly. I don't think I've ever bought Sephora without spending at least $100. And I'll go in with a very targeted list because I know myself and I'm like, you know yourself, don't play yourself. But I get got literally every single time. Like it's like I'm about to check out, and even in the checkout aisle, there are all these little travel size products that are calling my name, and I pick it up and I'm like, well, it's only $20 or $15. Like I can test it and then decide if I want to buy the full size. I don't ever buy the full size, full disclosure. So I think to your point, like we need to be more intentional. It sounds like we need to be more intentional about what we're buying and why we're buying it. And the skincare graveyard is such a powerful, I think, image because you open that medicine cabinet or whatever, you look at your dresser and it's just filled with half empty bottles of things that you're not even using. I know why we're being marketed, obviously, but like, why do we fall prey to these marketing schemes? Because I do know better. To your point, Rachel, I think I do know better and I'm not immune to it. I try to do better, but I still find that I buy skincare. And I think the added piece from a sobriety standpoint is when I was drinking, and before times I'll call them, I did not care or take care of my skin the way that I do now. So I wasn't investing in myself then in the way that I take pride in. Like, for example, there were nights when after drinking too much, partying too hard, I would just pass out. I wouldn't wash my makeup off. So I take a lot of pride. Like right now, as we film this, I don't have any makeup on. I would never leave the house before sobriety without makeup on because my skin just didn't look the way it looks now. And it's not perfect, but I'm so proud of the progress. I say all that to say that I think there's a lot of like pathos or like emotional responses connected to buying, even though the logos, the logic isn't mathing. Like the math is not mathing, but like I understand the emotional component of wanting to buy things to make me feel better.
Totally. I totally agree. So first of all, I just want to say that when I met you, you looked friggin' stunning. You're wearing a long red dress. You had glowing, beautiful skin. And I was like, I got to talk to this girl. Like this is the look. But so I am not surprised that you take really good care of your skin because it is amazing.
I appreciate that.
To kind of like answer that question though, I want to actually touch on, and I don't know if you or your listeners have read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to me, like I use this book as a reference all the time. So I'm just going to quickly summarize this concept that like, when you are transitioning your identity, you really want to give yourself evidence of this new identity, right? So like if your old identity was that of a drinker, someone who was partying, someone who wasn't.
Sure. Functional alcoholic by definition.
Yeah, sure. So like if that was your identity, not to say that like maybe I don't really, because this is not my area of expertise. Like I don't know if folks who were former functional alcoholics and are in recovery still refer to themselves as alcoholics, or if they have changed that kind of verbiage, right? But the point is the terminology or the idea around the identity of a person who does not take care of themselves, is not dealing with their emotional issues, all of the above, not taking care of their bodies in any way, shape, or form. Although I would argue that there's probably some folks who are, not sober at the moment who are using tons of products to try to like balance out the lack of the internal care.
Yes.
But when you shift that identity to someone who is taking care of yourself, it's really low-hanging fruit to buy something that you have been told by 17 influencers is going to give you the plumpest lips that mankind has ever seen, the best hyaluronic acid that has ever existed, the best face roller, jade roller, thingy-majiggy, whatever it is. So like it gives you this evidence of this new identity that you want to have, right? And so it's very easy to girl math it or justify it. And then in addition to that, you get the dopamine hit of the actual purchase. You get to enjoy the experience of shopping. Like I also, as a person who's pretty frugal, I still like going into these stores and I get sucked in too, right? So like, I think that there is a lot kind of different things happening there, but I think it's an easy one to justify because you are so committed to this idea that you are taking care of yourself now. And this is one of the ways that you do that. And so it's really easy to justify skincare and anything in the name of wellness. And again, this is not to say that you should not be buying those things. I just want you to buy them with intention.
Yeah, it also sounds a little bit like misguided expectations, because if you buy it, it reminds me of like the Instagram reels that I see where it's like somebody buys like a face mask and it's like, you better fix my life. Like, it's just like this one little thing is going to like transform everything. We put so much hope into like this thing, this product that's going to give us all of these benefits, whether they come true or not. I think there is an inherent danger sometimes when you put too much expectation onto external things to transform you in other ways. I love everything that you shared. And I love also that you, as a financial coach, still sometimes, fall for some of the marketing ploys that are so powerful and so like they know what they're doing. In sobriety, I think another idea of like promises that we've been told, or lies that maybe we've been told, is, in sobriety, you save so much money because you're not spending said money at the bar or going to your local wine shop. I actually think in the very beginning of sobriety, I did save money. I did save money because I wasn't, like I said, going to the bar. And there's a hidden cost associated too with drinking in excess, because it's not just, oh, you're spending money at the bar. Because to be honest with you, like I was pretty savvy. I'd get guys to buy my drinks after. Like I wasn't spending as much as I could be spending, but it's like the Uber home. I'm too drunk to take the subway. I'm too drunk to, I don't drive, but hopefully people aren't drinking and driving. So then you Uber when maybe you could have found another alternative route home, or, eating a ton of food and just making like terrible decisions inebriated was something that I did a lot. So when I first got sober, yes, like I think I did save money. Fast forward 2.5 years, I don't know anymore. I don't think I'm saving as much as I could be, or going back to the idea that in sobriety you save money, I don't think the girls are saving as much because we're spending on self-care. So any thoughts around that? And also, how can we pivot? Because if we are spending a ton of money on, self-care, such as we mentioned, skincare, or even like workouts, like I went to Pilates this morning, that's easily a $40 class for one class. Shopping, a lot of addiction replacement in terms of buying things, packages delivered, things like that. So any thoughts around how we can kind of reframe the way in which we are seeing self-care and spending our coins?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we all know, and I'm going to say this knowing that I sound very mansplaining here, but like we all know that real self-care is things like going to bed reasonably early, waking up reasonably early, drinking plenty of water, eating nutritious whole foods, right? Which is an expensive thing to do, especially in New York City. So self-care does not have to be expensive, right? So I want to kind of reframe some of what we talk about in terms of self-care. And I would also argue that building a savings account and investing money is one of the biggest forms of self-care. Like if you've ever been really low on money and like waiting for that next paycheck, you know that it is not a good feeling. You're just hoping that something doesn't break, the car doesn't die, you don't have to go to the dentist, like, you know, and I'm sure that there's listeners here who are listening to this who are thinking, yeah, like I actually wake up kind of stressed about money every morning. I have credit card debt, all of the above. And I think that the idea of actually saving money and investing and investing in yourself, you've used the word investing in myself, like you've used that phrase a lot, right? And a lot of people, a lot of marketing around investing in ourselves looks like buying something for ourselves. Right. And I want to say, what if you just literally invested in yourself and got yourself some financial literacy, right? And started investing in an account, in a Roth IRA, setting up an emergency fund. I think that a lot of my clients in particular, like, have a big aha moment that they see money as a resource that's intended to be spent. And when they start working with me, they realize that money is a resource that's intended to be kept, right? And what's so powerful about wealth is the money you cannot see, right? So I drive a station wagon from 1999. I wear the same 4 outfits over and over and over. I just, those are the decisions that I make in order to have all this money. So I think if you saw me, and you hear me say all the time, like, oh yeah, that was expensive, or yeah, I don't really feel like I can afford that right now. And it doesn't mean I don't have the money to buy it. It means that I'm prioritizing how I use my money differently. And I think that just even starting to change your mindset a little bit around how you are investing in yourself is a really interesting way to reframe the idea of self-care, right? Like, what are the things that really move the needle for you? So like, for example, and I'm no expert in this either, but I am currently doing an online coaching program to improve my strength. I want to be stronger. I want to be healthier. So I'm doing things like buying protein. I am listening to a podcast. They were talking about buying essential amino acids and just like the massive impact that will have on your ability to generate muscle. So I'm going to research this, and I'm probably going to buy some essential amino acids. To me, that kind of self-care is really important because I can really see scientifically that this is helping me in the same way that I can see numerically that the investing is working. So I think if you're using shopping maybe as a little bit of addiction replacement, and you might know it, or maybe you don't know it, right? I have an amazing free tool, happy for anyone to take advantage of it, that helps you do a little bit of that forensic accounting so that you can look back at how you spent money over a 30-day period and just ask yourself, am I comfortable with this? Like, am I happy with this? It is just an observation. It is not a judgment. It's just so that you can say like, oh, hey, actually, like I probably should just get a gym membership because I am going to these fitness classes. I like them, but I don't $400 a month like them. Right?
Yeah.
And also cost per use. So like, class is very clear, you know exactly how much you're spending, but if you're buying something, like if you're going to a wedding, I'm going to a dear friend's wedding a week from today, and I bought my dress essentially on Poshmark for like under $30. It's like cost per use is really low on things you wear to a wedding. So it's just kind of, I think, really a mindset shift and giving yourself the opportunity to reframe your identity as a person who's really good with money, because it's just a learned skill. Like anything, it's a learned skill.
There's a lot of financial coaches that push saving, minimalism, invest every saved penny. How much should we be, and I don't know if you can quantify it exactly for us, but like, what is the balance between how much I'm spending, saving, investing, and how do I maximize my quality of life while I have life?
It's such a good question. So I talk a lot about intentional spending with my clients, and you'll see me talk about it a lot in my social media content too. I talk a lot about traveling because I personally get a lot of value out of traveling. So I spend a lot of money on traveling, and I don't feel a strong hesitation. Like my girlfriends and I are talking about taking a 40th birthday trip to Thailand, and I'm like excited about it. I'm like, cool, let's research resorts, So I think that it's really important to understand what gives you lasting value. So some of the girls listening to this are going to be like, I adore skincare. I've spent a ton of time researching it. In fact, I want to start my own skincare line or whatever it is. So I've just been sitting here saying like, skincare is a waste of money. That's really not the case. It's just, is it something that you want to prioritize, right? Because we have limited resources. And I think it's okay to just say like, hey, I have limited resources. What are the things that I really enjoy? So like, for example, yeah, you may have spent $40 on that Pilates class this morning, but like if your back feels amazing, you feel refreshed, you feel energized, you're ready to take on your weekend, then it was probably $40 well spent, right? And I think that saying, okay, so I know that that is really valuable to me. Now I'm not spending money on alcohol and drugs like I might have been before. Mm-hmm. What did I put that money to? right? So, and you asked me, can I quantify how much you should spend? And there's a couple of like ways of doing this, but I'm a big believer in managing my money and my clients' money as well. They do the same thing with a bucket system. So I basically have 3 buckets, and we can break down what's inside those 3 buckets. But the first bucket is your core cost of living.
Right.
And however much your core cost of living is going to determine how much you put towards your other goals. But in this example in my head, let's say that 50% of your money is going to your rent, your groceries, your, if you have a car, any kind of vehicle expenses or pet expenses or kid expenses, right? 50-ish%. For a lot of folks who live in New York, it might be higher, 60, 65,
I was going to say,
right?
the magic number, would you say, or percentage, Rachel, is that like a good amount? Like, okay, if you're spending 50% of your salary devoted to these essentials, is that good? Or do you feel like it should be higher, lower? Like, what's the parameter there?
Yeah, so it's all about what your personal preference is. So if you are a total homebody and you really need your home to be a sanctuary and you have no qualms about spending 70% of your income on your core living expenses, and I want to be clear, I'm talking about post-tax income, like the actual money that hits your checking account that's like spendable money.
Okay.
For you, that may have a lot of value. I am not a person for whom that has a ton of value because I like doing stuff. I'm the person who wants to take the Pilates class. I want to take the surfing lessons. I want to go to Bali, so for me, like I said, I really kept my cost of living as low as possible because it really, I cannot express to you how big of a difference it makes to have your rent be only 25% of your take-home pay versus having it be 40% of your take-home pay. Like that 15% is a huge differential, right? So if you're making, and I'm going to use simple numbers to make my life easy, but if your take-home pay is roughly $4,000 a month and $2,000 of it is going to $1,875 in rent, and then just like your utilities, you're easily at 50% just between your rent and your utilities, which is very common in New York. It is going to make it a lot harder to use the other 50% of your money to save and to spend on fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I say for me, what can you do to keep your housing costs down, right? Number 1. Number 2, what can you do to keep your food costs down? So I am a meal prep believer. I've done it for years and years and years, but I don't mind eating the same things over and over again. But today I had grilled chicken and I made this like buffalo sauce that I just accidentally discovered yesterday. I made it again today. It's got like yogurt and hot sauce and some oregano in it. It's like not fancy. But like to me, knowing that I spent I live in a cheap place, but 40 euros on food and it will last me like 6 days is like really exciting because it means that I have so much money to spend on other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So that begs the question. This is not sponsored by Starbucks, but I do have a Starbucks. This comes up a lot. Coffee a day. Is it a big deal? Is it going to break the bank if I order a Starbucks every morning for a year?
How much was it?
Like $4 and change.
Okay. So can I make my math easy and call it $5?
Yeah, call it 5. This is a lot, right? Like people are always like, skip the coffee, make coffee at home. And then like other people are like, is that really going to move the needle? So yeah, I have Starbucks. So I'm wondering, is that going to move the needle? I also have a Prep membership as well, where they do the $40 club thing. So I get unlimited drinks, but I also did Starbucks today. I know the math is not mathing. Anyway, $5 a day.
Okay, so $5 a day times, are we doing it 5 days a week or 7 days a week?
I would say 5 days a week. Yeah.
Okay, so it's $25 a week. It's $100 a month. It's $1,200 a year. Do I think that $1,200 a year is breaking the bank? No, I do not. But what I want to say is it's really not about the about the money. It's about the habit. It's about the habit of just swiping that card without really thinking about it over and over and over again. It opens you up to just like, oh, I'm just going to veer into Duane Reade and get a protein bar, even though I could probably get home and just make some scrambled eggs. Or and then when you get into Duane Reade, you see a nail polish, and then you also decide to stock up on some micellar water or whatever, and then it's $35 to get out of Duane Reade. So now you've spent, $40 and you haven't even gotten home from your $40 Pilates class. And I think that's really where it adds up. And people are not aware of how much they're spending, which is exactly why like this tool that I give away for free, it's very eye-opening. And this is not to say that you shouldn't, like if you actually just really enjoy the experience of getting a Starbucks, that's amazing. But if you're starting your day with a Starbucks coffee and a breakfast sandwich from there, you're spending $10 or $12. Then you're going to Sweet Green for lunch. It's another $18. So now we're at $30 and you haven't exercised, you haven't eaten dinner, you haven't taken the subway. haven't gone to the dentist, whatever it is that you have to do. Like, I think that that's really what this comes down to, is the habit of just feeling like really comfortable spending money every single day on everything that passes in front of our faces.
We make it so easy. Even like the contactless payment system with just tapping your card, like you're just so less aware of how everything is compounding and adding up. And you're right, it is the habit, because yeah, $1,200 a month, like, or a year, I'm sorry, it's something, but it's not necessarily the most, significant impact to like your overall wealth. But to your point, it's like, it lends itself to like, I'm just gonna now also get this other thing, or I'm going to continue to be oblivious to how the rest of my day unfolds in terms of spending. So I appreciate you saying that. And that's why I do have the Pret, but sometimes Pret is not as convenient as Starbucks. So the Pret is $40 a month, which I think is more manageable. And I get like unlimited drinks for the day. So I'm like, that's amazing. And then also earlier you mentioned ClassPass. I do have a ClassPass membership, which it's expensive, but it helps me track my spending better. So I know how much credits I'm spending and how much they're worth, as opposed to, I also like versatility when it comes to my workouts. So I don't necessarily want to be a member of one gym and only do that one thing. So I can kind of break up the monotony of my workouts. And someone had mentioned memberships as being like the one thing that you need to do a deep dive into, because like even Netflix, even like the subscription boxes, they're like, cancel it all, because that is just being automatically deducted from your check every month. And you don't even realize that, you're in the whole $500 for the month for things that you may or may not be fully utilizing. Anyway, so bucket one, going back to your spending plan. Okay, so bucket one is like non-negotiable essentials, essentially, like your basic living needs. What's bucket two?
Yeah, so bucket two is your fun money, right? And so it really depends on, basically how much your essentials are. But if your essentials are 50%, I like to split the other 50% equally between saving and fun.
Okay.
So that would be 25% of your income going to savings, which is a lot. I know people are like falling off their chair right now thinking about putting half of an entire paycheck into their savings, but let me hear me out on this. So
wait, is it half third though? Because if it's half of the fun money, it's like 25%, no? Or is it 50?
Oh, so like if you're looking at if your 50% of your total monthly income is going to your core expenses, and then the other 50% gets split in half. So 25% of it is going towards saving. Saving.
Going back to I'm a very visual person. So going back to the math, $4,000, say that's how much you make a month. We're using that analogy. 2,000 living expenses. Now you're left with 2,000. 1,000 out of the 2,000 is devoted solely to saving.
This is, yes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be really clear here and say, I think yes, $1,000 should be going solely to saving. Now, 5 to 10% of that should be going towards things that are called sinking funds. Sinking funds are savings accounts that are designated to be spent usually in the next year or two. So you might have a sinking fund that's just for travel. You might have a sinking fund that is just for plastic surgery, right? You could have a sinking fund for anything. A lot of folks have them for down payments, for weddings. Of course, I suggest you have one for car repairs if you have a car, and home repairs if you have a home. Okay. But of that 25%, probably roughly, 5 to 10% should be going to fund stuff that's happening in the future, right? Okay. So not all of that 25% is truly going to long-term savings. Some of it is going to short-term savings that you should be planning to spend, right? You could be saying to yourself, I really want to go to Colombia this spring. I need to start saving for it, right? And setting that money aside. And then when the time comes, you have full permission to just spend it, right? That's what you saved it for. So you can go on this vacation without the buyer's remorse, or I always call it the financial hangover, when you come home from a trip and you're like, oh, look at these credit card bills, right?
I just racked up, swipe, swipe, swipe. And
it's so easy. Or maybe it's just tap, tap, tap now. And then they flip the screen around and it's like your options for tipping are 25, 30, and 35. And you're like, am I really supposed to tip you $35 for or 35% for this croissant you just handed me out of the glass case?
Yeah. And otherwise you get the stink eye. And it's I didn't do anything. I could have over, but okay.
Yep, exactly. So, 25%, so $1,000 going towards those savings and investments. And then the remaining of the, 5 to 10%, whatever you have left there, the 15 to 20% that you have left, I personally would put it towards, for myself, at least towards long-term investments and long-term savings. So your emergency fund, and if your emergency fund is full, by the way, if you already have 3 to 6 months of lean expenses, you don't have to keep adding to it. I think this is something that people don't understand, is that your emergency fund, it needs to adjust in size with your cost of living. So for example, Nadine, if you bought a house and all of a sudden you had a much, bigger responsibility, you would need to increase your emergency fund. By the way, your emergency fund is not your down payment fund. I know ladies hate me for saying this, but it's really important to say it. But in terms of, there's sort of a general rule of thumb that that David Bach talks about a lot in his book, The Automatic Millionaire, which is a great book if y'all are looking for a book on how to, achieve financial freedom and prepare for retirement. But he says basically 15% of your money should be getting saved and invested for retirement. So that can look like money going into your 401k or 403b or that annuity that you have access to. And it could be money going into your IRA. Now, some people, so for my clients, if you're trying to achieve financial independence and you want to retire early, that early could be 40, that early could be 55, whatever it is, you do want to funnel as much as you can into those investment accounts. So you might say, I actually want to put 15% into my investments and my employer is matching 6%. So I'm doing 21% every month. But in Rachel's world of how one could manage money well, I would not include that employer contribution in my math. It's just gravy on the top.
So
that's how you really get ahead.
Annuity from my job, that would not be necessarily factored into this equation. Got it.
Yeah.
So it's also pick your own, sorry to cut you off, but it's also kind of pick your own pace, pick your own adventure. If you want to be more aggressive because you want to seek or achieve financial freedom by the age of 45, then you have to go extra hard. But if you are more at leisure with your pacing, then you can, adjust as needed kind of thing.
Absolutely. There are a lot of folks for whom working is actually a source of joy. Not only do they like what they do, they like their colleagues, they feel satisfied from it. Maybe you have kids and it's a really nice break from your kids. Whatever it is, not everybody wants to get out of the workforce, and it's completely acceptable to say, hey, I just want to have a comfortable retirement when I'm 65 or 67 or 59 or whatever it is. I don't need to warp speed this. And I totally respect that. And I also respect that if you are a person who's potentially knows you're going to inherit some money, or there's a lot of other possibilities, your future might look different than my future, right? And so I think there's definitely validity in evaluating your own situation, and saying to yourself, wow, $1,000 a month towards savings just does not feel nice to me. It doesn't feel good. And that's okay. You don't also have to start there, right? If you're saving $200 a month, and you turn that 200 into 350, you've done yourself a huge service already. So think about where you're at right now. You don't need to go warp speed and go full on into this 25% out of the gate. I would actually recommend, think about these small changes. What does 5 or 10% increase on your savings look like? And can you just kind of adjust to that and then knock it up a little bit further again? So, because I think sometimes people get turned off, like you said, by these financial folks who are well, you need to save all this money for retirement. You're well, I'm 31.
Recycle your toilet paper. No, thank you. No.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to honor some folks who may be in a financial hole. So going back to sobriety, I think once you remove the substance, then you start fixing other areas of your life. So what should my girls do who may be in credit card debt, maybe suffering from living from paycheck to paycheck, or not have a nest egg? What would some of the priorities look like if you're in a situation like that?
Yeah. So if you do not have any money at all in an emergency fund, I would personally be making minimum payments on all my credit cards until you can save some money in your emergency fund.
Interesting. I've heard different viewpoints around this topic. Is the nest egg more important than the debt? Because the credit card debt is at a higher rate of interest. So some people say prioritize that, but you're more so of the thought that you should get the nest egg together.
Well, let me throw it to you this way. So like Nadine, let's say that you have $10,000 of credit card debt and you're, living on a teacher's salary in New York City and you're struggling to pay it off, right? And every month, it just seems like something comes up, right? So like last month you had to get a root canal, and then like this month, I don't know, you fell and you sprained your wrist and you had to go to urgent care and get an x-ray. Every single month, like the money that you thought you were going to be able to put towards your debt, you basically, even though you already paid your debt off with your paycheck, or you paid your payment towards your debt with your paycheck, you end up having to use the credit card again. And so it's really demoralizing, and it makes people feel like they can't get out of that loop. Yeah. So just acknowledging that, like, yes, you have the debt. Yeah, it is earning interest. It's not the end of the world. Get yourself a little bit of an emergency fund so that not if it happens, when it happens, because it will happen. You're going to need, a new set of tires, or you're going to have to go, you're going to step on your glasses. All of these things happen, right? Like we've all been there. So I think just acknowledging like it's a when this happens, not an if this happens. And then from there, I am a huge believer in paying the same amount towards your debt every month instead of throwing as much as you can towards your debt. And that is because I see this a lot with folks. Especially if, you earn a lot of money. Like, let's say you're more of that like 6-figure earner, which is kind of typically who I'm helping, or people who are in the, high fives, 70, 80, 90K a year. They're getting their paycheck and they're putting $2,000 towards their credit card debt. But then what happens is, they're 6 days away from their next paycheck and something happens. They don't have enough groceries, they got to put gas in the car, whatever happens. And then you end up using the credit card again. So
right. Swiping or tapping. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's demoralizing, and we don't realize how much we're doing this 1 step forward, 2 step backward thing. So I'd actually recommend, even though everyone is going to hate that I'm saying this, I personally think it's better to start paying that debt off a little bit more slowly and a little bit more consistently, so that you just can absolutely put those credit cards in the sock drawer, take them off of Amazon, take them off of Apple Pay, delete them out of your Instagram account. Because if you're using your credit cards at all, paying credit card debt off is very, very, very difficult. So you really have to be not using them. And also there's so much shame and so much guilt around, having credit card debt. But I cannot tell you how many people I talk, so many people have credit card debt. So if you're dealing with credit card debt and you've been through this huge transformation in your life where you've really taken sort of radical accountability for your addiction problems, I would so strongly encourage you to just be willing to take some of that like life force that you use to get yourself kind of into a place where you could be honest about your sobriety with your friends and family and say, and this is called a new trend, it's called loud budgeting. Just tell your friends, I'm really excited. I'm going to be paying my credit card debt off by X, Y, and Z date. So you might hear me saying like, hey, I'd love to hang out, but actually I'm not going to join you for dinner. I'll just, let's go for a walk on Saturday instead.
I love that. That's such an amazing concept. What is it called again? Loud
budgeting.
And I think there's a parallel with even sobriety. A lot of people recommend having accountability partners, and to have an accountability partner, you have to speak up. You have to loudly pronounce that, hey, I'm not drinking, or I'm trying to be sober, or so people can help you sort of reach that goal and sustain that goal for yourself. And I think it also does another thing where that sense of vulnerability where you're being forthcoming about your spending goals or your spending habits, or the fact that you even have credit card debt to begin with, lends itself to other people to also open up or try to also think more mindfully about their spending patterns. So I think it's doing a couple things there that could be really beneficial to not just you, but maybe some other people that, especially when we are in a society that's all about keeping up with the Joneses, or we have to present we have the latest trend or the latest this and that. And it's well, how do you have all of this and you're able to do that? Well, maybe it's because you're in credit card debt. And that's also a human experience that we can be a little bit more open about. It seems like the root of this is honesty in terms of self-awareness and sobriety, but also honesty in terms of how my finances are looking and how I can adjust accordingly if I don't like how my finances are actually looking.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to just ask yourself is, am I comfortable with this? Not necessarily do I like it, am I happy with it, but am I comfortable with this? And I think you kind of just mentioned something and it's such a big part, especially in New York City, such a big part of what I see with girls who have a lot of credit card debt is they are comparing themselves to other people. And so they're using what they perceive other people's financial situations to be as a barometer for whether or not they should be able to afford a similar thing, instead of just sort of comparing yourself to yourself, right? Like, again, it's so much about being intentional with how you use your money and saying to yourself, you know what, like, yeah, that new bag that Sarah just got is super cool and she looks really cute. I love it. But like, actually, I'd rather save that $250 for a flight because I want to go to Coachella or whatever. You know what I mean? So just really being intentional. And also, when you make the decision not to buy something that you could maybe have afforded to buy, put that money right into the savings account.
Yeah, someone told me that when you make a sound financial decision in that very moment, go into the app and transfer that money. And it could be as small as like, instead of me taking Uber and spending $20 to go 5 blocks, I take the subway or I walk. So then you move that money directly into your savings. I love that so much. I'm doing right now with my family a challenge where it's just $5,000 saved for the month. Or not month, I'm sorry. I wish.
It's like,
yeah, for the year. Yeah, for the year. And it's like, it's broken up into these smaller pieces. So every Sunday, I get a text from my cousin and she draws 2 numbers. So it could be literally, it's between 1 to like, I think, $200 or something like that. So it's like it could be $38 and $72. And like, that's how much you have to move over into your savings right then and there. And so it basically over the span of a year, it's $5,000. And so that's what I'm doing. It's only been like a month and change, but it's been fun to like immediately, it's almost like you're gamifying the process of saving, because it's almost like, oh, like, is it going to be a lower numbers this month, or is it going to be higher this week? I keep saying month, but this week. So it's really fun to kind of do that. And like the shared community of having like a group chat devoted to that has been really fun as well, because you hear all the social commentary like, oh man, like it's $200 this week as opposed to $30 this week. So yeah, that's something that, and the numbers don't reoccur. So it's like it's almost like, what's that game show with the briefcases? Deal No Deal. It's just like, oh, what's the number going to be this week? It's really fun.
Yeah. And I love the idea of just like, it's a bit like loud budgeting. Like we have there's like an iron curtain around money, right? We like just don't talk about it. And maybe within families a little bit we do, but a lot of friends do not talk about money with each other. And now that I'm a financial coach, and even I was always that friend who was like, hey guys, I don't want to go to that restaurant. It's out of my budget. Like, I'll catch you later. And then, 9 times out of 10, my friends would be like, oh, we'll just pick somewhere different. Right.
Yeah.
I've always been the cheap friend. And it's funny because one of my girlfriends said to me the other day, you're not cheap. You just don't like spending money on stuff you don't care about. And you're really honest with everybody about that. And it's like, that is who I am. But I also have become that friend that gets text messages every time one of my friends gets a raise. So there was one single day last month where I got 3 different text messages from friends. These aren't even clients, just to say, oh my God, I'm really excited. I got a raise. I can't like celebrate this with anyone other than you, but I got a raise. This is how much it is. This is how it's going to impact my life. I'm super excited. Like you're the only person I can say this to. And it's like kind of sad that we as girlfriends don't feel like we can celebrate our friends' financial like health and wellness. Like I'm super excited for everyone every time they get a raise, whether it's 2% or 20%. And I wish that we could share in that celebration together and start to use money as more of a way to connect with folks, because it isn't about, how much you have. So-and-so has more money than so-and-so. That doesn't make them a better person. That doesn't mean that they're happier. It doesn't mean that they're healthier. It doesn't mean they enjoy their job more, right? So like, how can we just open up that conversation just a little bit so that we can share in the literacy and the information, like what you're doing with your cousin and your family. Like, I love this. I love being able to be like, ooh, $220 this week. That was painful. Like, yeah, it is. That's a lot of money that you weren't necessarily anticipating spending.
I love that so much. And I wonder if, your girlfriends are coming to you, like sharing these successes and they're like, oh, I can only share this with you, Rachel. I'm wondering if it's because women from a financial literacy standpoint feel like we're still less versed on some of the literature around finances. And they feel like because you're a financial coach, obviously you know what you're talking about and maybe can help them figure out how to not overspend the raise that they've now gotten and not raise their actual living costs, because that often happens as well. But then also B, they feel like yeah, like you will celebrate the successes as the quote unquote cheap friend, but like you're not the cheap friend, as you mentioned. You are the friend that just knows how to spend their money on things that they actually care about. So I love that so much. And I aspire to be more mindful. And even in this conversation today, I've once again taken away so much information that I can now use to better my life and not feel shameful about the expenses that I am currently choosing to prioritize, but more mindful about the expenses that maybe I'm like, okay, this is mindless. I'm not actually excited about spending this money for the sake of the product. So thank you, Rachel, so much for all of that. I know that you mentioned you have some freebies for my audience. So can you just kind of plug that for us again? And if there's anything else that you would like to share at this time, this would be amazing. I will link everything in the show notes so that people have access to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is like one of my favorite subjects, Nadine. So like, I hope that people walk away feeling empowered to choose the self-care that really aligns with their values and their goals. That's really what I stand for, is just using your money in alignment with your own values and your own goals. So I hope that that kind of came through, and I hope folks don't feel like I'm shaming them for not saving enough.
No, not at all. I think it was very clear.
And also, you never really know what's coming financially. Like, one of the things we didn't really touch on is that the reason I actually ended up quitting my job was I met a super handsome British guy on the internet and like left New York City to like travel and be with him. And now we live overseas. So like, that's because I had the financial resources to take advantage of that opportunity when it came my way. So like, it's definitely like, there's so much more that you can do with money. Money is not just to be saved. It's buying yourself opportunity and buying yourself freedom.
It's almost reminding me of like, be ready so you don't have to get ready. Like, I'm just thinking in that situation, if you had met this amazing, handsome British guy and you were in a financial position to be with him or make that leap of faith or move, like that would suck. Like you would be still here in New York, like thinking about this man that potentially could have been, instead of being with your man. So I absolutely love that. And I feel like just you and I are aligned in so many of like the things that we value in life, because as much as I would definitely say I'm more materialistic, I love travel. And if you were to look in my finances, do an inventory of my finances, you would see like travel is probably at the top of my priorities. And so I don't want to forego travel. And it sounds like I don't have to, so long as I'm maybe skipping the Starbucks and skipping some of the other minuscule things that are not actually sparking joy in my life.
But back to your question about the freebie. So the freebie is, and like, I know this doesn't sound sexy and exciting, you guys, but it is just an opportunity that's going to help you to organize how you used all of your money over a 30-day period. So look and see, like, how did you spend money in January, or how did you spend money in October? A time that you maybe aren't really going to remember it. And you go through all of your bank statements, all of your credit card bills, and just write down in different categories, like, okay, this was eating out, this was fun money, this was self-care, whatever it is. And I've given you some categories to make it like kind of easy and, very accessible. And then it automatically is going to give you some data on the dashboard. It's going to show you, okay, what percentage of your money went to self-care? What percentage of your money went to shopping? What percentage of your money went to eating out? Just so that you can have that conversation with yourself and say, am I comfortable with this, right? That's really what we're trying to achieve here. And of course, if you have questions about it or you want to chat with me or connect with me, you can find me on Instagram at Rachel, RACHEL _talks money. I'm also on TikTok. It's just very hard to connect on TikTok, but I make different videos for TikTok than I do for IG. So if you just can't get enough of me talking about money, certainly head over to the socials and follow me over there. I'm always happy to connect, and also tell me that you are a Sober Butterfly listener so that I'll know exactly where you found me. And shout out to Nadine. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a fun conversation.
It's so much fun. And I think this is just the beginning. I definitely want to connect more and talk more about how we can optimize our lifestyle in sobriety.